And tonight it's at 8 to 9 p.m. at the Bechtel International Center, which is like right across from West Lomo. There will be cream, and it's an impact investing fireside chat with David Hood, who's the managing director of Solomon Capital, which is a social and environmental impact investing firm. He used to be the managing director of Stanford Management Company. And then we'll also have Mark Parenti, who's a professor at Santa Clara and works as the director of impact investing for their Center for Social Entrepreneurship. So it should be really cool. It'll be like a small event, and there will be cream. So you should all come out. It'll be fun. And if you want to go to the protest afterwards, you'll still have time to do that. Yeah. And then this week's speaker is Vince Siciliano, who's the president and CEO of New Resource Bank, an ethically focused bank centered around the idea of supporting nonprofits, businesses, and individuals who are working for a more sustainable world. New Resource Bank is based on the intention of making a responsible and proactive business possible, the underlying idea that money can be more than a medium for exchange and instead an agent for change. So please join me in welcoming him. Thank you.
That was a nice, can you hear me okay? That was a nice summary, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to be able to talk to you about banking. How many people grew up wanting to be a banker? One. Yeah, so I did not grow up wanting to be. Okay, well, half, 1.5, all right. So I certainly did not grow up wanting to be a banker. I came here, I could never figure out what my major was going to be. I ended up majoring in both human biology. I was in the first graduating class of human bio majors. And then I also did a second energy, it was called engineering and technology major, and focused on environmental planning. And that was a way just to take a lot of different things. Fortunately, one of them added up to a major. And ultimately, I'll tell you, I'll get into this and tell you my story as we go along. I'm going to tell you about my personal story first before we get into the bank. So let's see, does this work? Yeah. So, some of you might recognize that's President Eisenhower, right? And I'm the smiling guy in the back row. And obviously I should have been the center of the picture, but Eisenhower has his hands on my brother's head. And so this is on an auto, looks like it's on an autofocus, auto advanced. And I grew up in Washington, D.C. My father worked with President Eisenhower, later for President Nixon. It was a very heady kind of atmosphere. Important people came to the house, names you would know. And it sort of set the basis for me that as I grew up, I was growing up in a land of very high expectations. That what I call really the master of the universe upbringing, right? So if you've seen Bonfire of the Vanities, anybody seen that movie? You would have you'll read about or see. It's a great movie about Wall Street and about this guy who is a master of the universe and I control this when you go forward. So anyway, master of the universe means that I'm the smartest guy in the room. I'm always going to be number one. And that was my purpose in life, was to be number one. That's kind of how I was raised going forward. I did end up spending some time here at Stanford, which was great. And in fact, in 1972, there were protests against the Cambodian incursion, the part of the Vietnam War. That is my soon-to-be wife and me climbing over the fence with the Palo Alto police in the background. So it was definitely a tumultuous time. Ultimately, I ended up quite by accident becoming a banker. I did not desire to be a banker. What happened was my wife studied Chinese history here and at Berkeley. I went to Berkeley and got a master's in environmental planning. She wanted to go to the Stanford Center in Taiwan, and so I said sure. But the problem was I needed a job. We couldn't just show up and they weren't going to hire me as a foreigner. My father at that point ran a company in California that was a major depositor of Bank of America. So he calls up the chairman of Bank of America, literally, and says, hire my wonderful son, which they did. And except I was not a traditional hire for them because I had no business background. And when I showed up in Tokyo on the way to Taiwan, they told me that I was a legacy hire. So that was not a nice thing to tell somebody, i.e., you're hired because of somebody else, their relationship with the bank, not because of your necessarily your own qualifications. However, it worked out very well. I ended up spending 7 years with B of A in several countries. It was a fantastic experience. B of A was a small bank in those places. I traveled a lot. And what got me about banking at that point was that it's really all about everybody else's business. It's really about understanding people their aspirations, their fears, their psychology, the businesses they're trying to run, and the legacy they're trying to leave. So it was really very interesting. I came back from Asia, went to San Diego, and I ran a series of banks there in San Diego, which brought up the topic of success. And so I thought I was very successful. I was on my Master of the Universe track. Except this funny thing happened on the way to the universe, and that is that failure happens. It turns out that failure happens to almost everybody, but it happened to me. I got fired twice, once as a COO and once as a CEO. Those are both shattering experiences, and then one company I ran really didn't do very well. And so that really led me to this downward spiral, and really some depression and some examination about, oh, I guess the Master of the Universe thing doesn't work. And having a purpose in life being number one probably isn't going to work. And in fact, I have this right here. Where's the computer that I'm pointing this at, by the way?
Yeah, where's
Right here. So the question became, well, what is self-worth? And my self-worth was wrapped up in my job, my accomplishments, and the approval of others, right? You are what you own, what you do, and what other people think of you. That's kind of the American way, right? And so that I had bought into that hook, line, and sinker. The problem is that if you crash and burn at work, then work is bad, therefore I'm bad. Therefore my self-worth sinks. And that's not a very good thing. And I realized that that is not a way to build a life, was relying on my job to teach me, or to give me my self-worth. And so that really kind of began a journey that led me ultimately to what I call reframing the outward. You've probably heard some about impact investing, and I think you've got someone coming who's going to speak about impact investing. And the thing about impact investing, people say, you typically have people who typically want high returns in what they're doing, and they'll say, okay, I like to do good and do well. And it's kind of begrudgingly, I want to do good and do well. Well, am I going to have to take a compromise in my rate of return by doing good? And maybe I could just do well and make a lot of money, and then after that happens, I can do good. I can be a good person, a good spouse, or whatever. And so a lot of impact investing is struggling with this trade-off between doing good and doing well, and part of it is rooted in the fact that they don't define rates of return very clearly. It's only financially defined. They're not looking at externalities, whether they're positive or negative, and so they're really caught in the paradigm of, I need financial success because it's financial success that is all about where I get my self-worth from and my image in the world. And I was on a panel once, a panel at the Social Capital Conference. It was called A Nun, a Priest, a Philosopher, and a Banker. And I was the banker allegedly. And the question was, well, so why is it that we know the good we should do, but we don't do it? In other words, we know what it means to be socially responsible in our investing in our businesses, but people really struggle against it because they're really trying to make a lot of money instead. And the answer I came up with was really this whole idea that we have what I call the economy of doing well, and that's the economy where, as I said, your goal is to maximize wealth for yourself, and your accomplishments and approval of others is where you get your self-worth. Key values are money, sex, and power. And ultimately, I'm working to gain competitive advantage over everyone else, the core process being competition. Now think about that for a minute. Competition is always about contrasting and comparing, right? I am better than you. I'm up, you're down. So it's always a fear-pride kind of relationship going on. And that's what competition is all about. And in the end, that's why we kind of clump into tribes and whatnot, because we're taught to compare and contrast our whole lives. That's kind of a corrosive process for the soul. The sense of timing in the economy of doing well is everything is right now. It's very short time. We'll talk some more about that in a minute. And as a result, it's what I call you're a human doing. And on that side is ego. Ego meaning edging good out. Okay? So what's the opposite economy? That's what I call the economy of being well. So the economy of being well, it's really about well-being for people on the planet. And it's really about self-worth that's rooted in something else than accomplishments. It's about values, relationship, spiritual life, nature, sense of purpose. All of us have some of those things. We don't necessarily nurture those things. And the values, instead of money, sex, and power, are stewardship, generosity, and loving relationships. And the core process then, instead of competition, is collaboration. And of course you do compete, but you're collaborating around this vision of a different kind of society. And in the new economy that I'm part of, in the social economy, people get that. They're practicing mindful business, which is different from just practicing business. And so there's much more of a change of time. There's more focus on legacy. If you've ever heard of the company called Seventh Generation, they're out there planning for 7 generations out. How are they going to have an impact? And we'll talk some more about that in a minute. And so the result is what I call a human being rather than human doing. And instead of ego, it's eco, where you embrace the commons, where you embrace the community. So there's a lot packed into that slide, a lot of assumptions about, your worldview, and we could spend all the rest of the time on that, and you might have some questions about that. Yeah, that's the picture for ego. So, I'm going to start pivoting towards the bank. So financial crisis, right? 2008-9, crash in Wall Street, which you would think was an opportunity to sort of reform, right? We got Dodd-Frank passed with a lot of fighting, but unfortunately, it really hasn't held. The big banks and financial institutions are trying very hard to peel back Dodd-Frank and everything that restricted them. The heart of the matter was that banks became more universal, meaning that they could mix regular banking with investment banking. And that meant that they could take your money on deposits and they could invest it in the financial economy in a speculative way. And they would do that because the returns in the financial economy were so much higher than regular banking. And that's really what caused the crash, and we can talk more about that.